And this is exactly why they get away with having so many 808 switch ups. And here's the biggest reason why you should always do this. 90% of them are going to be using this VST, as well as the majority of drill beats. Alright, what's good YouTube? So in this tutorial, I'm going to be going over how to make those typical hard UK and New York type drill beats, or in other words, how 808 mellow and axle beats make their signature drill melodies. In this video, I'm going to be going over the essential structure tips that all producers need to know, the best VSTs and presets, how to create proper drum patterns, the best drum sounds to use, and how to find and manipulate drill samples, as well as various tips and tricks along the way. Also, if you want any of the drum sounds or samples that I use in this tutorial, there's a link in the description where you can download them completely free. Also, make sure to go follow my Instagram at FinnaFinesse. I'm going to be giving away another copy of my personal drum kit there tonight, so stay tuned for that. So right off the bat, before we start, you want to make sure that your project tempo is in the ranges of like 130 to 150, as the majority of drill beats sit in that range. Make sure to note that. But with that in mind, let's talk about drum sounds. So drums are like by far the most important thing to understand when it comes to drill beats, just because of how distinct they are from generic trap beats. So I'm going to illustrate this real quick. So every trap beat is going to contain this format of having these two kicks or 808s hitting after the first clap or right before the second. Also having the two claps hit here and having these two-step hi-hats that sound like this. But for drill, a typical pattern will look something like this, with the kick now hitting where the second clap was originally, and the clap being shifted over to the end of the pattern here. Also, the majority, but not all hi-hats, will hit on every third like this. Instead of the traditional two-step pattern, they usually will just follow variations similar to this that sound like this. This pattern will also sometimes be used with a snare instead of a hi-hat. Also, the typical sounds I use are very different. As for trap, when I think of typical trap sounds, I think of really tight drum sounds. Very specific ones would be stuff like the rack kick, the Zay or Spins 808, hit one or cardiac hi-hats, and the Lex Luger claps as well as snares. But for drill, it's completely different in this aspect. First off, the kicks and snares are super bass heavy and loud, and the leveling tips that I talked about in the mixing tutorial wouldn't really apply for these types of beats, because the kicks and snares are also usually clipping really hard. There's also lots of effects and sounds that are constantly playing in the beat, and the hi-hats are usually much quieter and looser than the ones that you'd hear in a typical trap beat. Also, when they're not using hard-hitting snares, they'll often use rim shots, and this is one that they use a lot. And finally, another sound that you'll hear a lot is the young chop snare. You also hear a lot of Vox sounds and a lot of shakers when they're not using hi-hats. Speaking of which, as you may have noticed, I use the same hi-hat in both examples between drill and trap, but in the drill example, it sounded much more like a shaker, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So what you want to do is go into the piano roll, hold shift, click and drag, and what that'll do is clone it right here. Double click it, select slide, and now what you want to do is you want to turn the velocity all the way down like this for this note, and then you want to layer them on top of each other. And then to shorten it and really make it sound like a shaker, you want to ensure that you shorten your hi-hats like this. So now it sounds like this. Also, with these hi-hats and shakers, you want to mess with the velocity a lot, because that'll make it sound like it's being played as a real instrument. In drill, the majority of hi-hat rolls will have this specific fade effect. Or those spaces will be filled in like this with lower velocity hi-hats with different fading in and out velocity rolls. Another thing you'll hear a lot is rhythmic effects, stuff like gunshots, voxes, as well as perks and lighter snare sounds. They'll usually play over, right before, or right after the kick and snare pattern, so stuff like this. Finally, the last thing you should know for drum sounds is that a lot of the times, presets used in drill will have a lot of reverb on them, specifically with the snares and vox sounds. So what you hear a lot of producers is cut these sounds off by using the envelope and making it look like this, or they'll have a muted version of each note playing with zero velocity that won't actually play, but will allow you to control when each sound cuts off. So as you can hear in the gunshot and vox examples, had I not done this, it would have sounded like this. Finally, as for 808 sounds, the majority of the time you'll want to use heavy bass 808s that are really long and stretched out. They usually hit every half beat, normally just following over the kick and hitting before or after the second one. Also, like with the FX sounds, you want to ensure that the envelope looks like this, so the 808 cuts off, as that's also a signature with a lot of these drill beats. And this is exactly why they get away with having so many 808 switch ups, because like I talked about more than anything on this channel, it's hitting on beat, so it doesn't really have any rhythmic quality, so it's not going to throw the artist off when you change it. The most signature thing about these 808s though, as probably a lot of you know, is the 808 slides. So it's just like with the hi-hat, you want to just add another note that layers on top of the other 808, just double click it, click slide, and place it over whichever note you want to have that effect. Also understand that the longer the note is, the more stretched out the slide will be, so if you want to make the slide a little bit faster, what you need to do is then shorten this note, and vice versa if you want to make it longer. So with the slides, it now sounds like this. Yeah, but that's it for the drums, all super essential stuff. So let's talk about the melodies. So drill melodies are either comprised of one of the two things, string orchestra samples or piano sounds. Let's talk about both. For piano-based drill beats, as well as the majority of drill beats, 90% of them are just using Nexus 2, all stock presets as well. I talked about this in the Suicide Boys tutorial, but Nexus is a really good VST because all the sounds are really well mixed and layered, so you can really just go preset picking all you like, and you don't have to use too many sounds as well, so I strongly recommend it. There's also good sounds that you can find in like Omnisphere, other VSTs, but honestly I do recommend that you make every drill beat with Nexus. As for the melody itself, you want to use a lot of tension between the notes to give it that evil vibe. Also understand that drill beats are carried by the drums, so don't overdo the melody or make it too complex. I can't say it enough, but stay on beat with the melody, keep the spacing between the notes like generally the same, and don't use way too many. So here are some examples of drill melodies. And here's the biggest reason why you should always do this, is you can create a bunch of different melodies, and because you kept them super simple and you gave them no rhythmic qualities, it's super easy to combine them, so you can make something really unique when you do that. And as for mixing, you can really just do all of it in the VST because it's super user friendly. Also try using this cutoff knob in the bottom as well, because like I said in the mixing tutorial, with drill beats, you're going to be using a lot of sounds, meaning we're going to have less space for each individual sound, so you want to EQ out as much as possible. Finally, as for effects, the only real effect you need to know is gross beat, specifically like the halftime preset. Like in the Metro tutorial, try making drill melodies with the halftime preset on in the mixer. Also try reversing your melodies because that's a cool effect that you hear in a lot of these types of beats. Finally, when you have your melody, honestly just layer sounds as you please. Make sure to also not add new notes when you're layering. Instead, what you just do is make a chord progression on top of whatever melody you started with, or just layer down the exact same melody that you originally wrote on different presets. It's really up to you, but that's it for piano-based melodies. So let's quickly talk about samples. I'm not going to break down how to sample because I have two other tutorials for that, so try watching the J. Cole tutorial as well as the beginning of the Wonder Girl tutorial if you want to know more about that, because everything I talk about there applies for these types of samples. For those who have, it's all the same stuff. Most of the string and orchestra samples that are used are just found through YouTube playlists. Look up stuff like string samples, drill orchestra samples, stuff like that, and honestly you can just use anything. One thing to understand though is to ensure that you're not just looping an entire string sample over the beat, because they tend to never be perfectly on time. You know, they speed up and slow down. So to fix that, try adding effects like gross beats or effectrix just to give it more rhythm and keep it on time. Like for example, this is a beat that I made with a string sample that isn't even on time whatsoever. I found it on YouTube. All I searched was like orchestra violin or something like that, and I just took the first thing that popped up. So apart from chopping it up a little bit, the sample completely dry sounds like this. As you can hear, it's not perfectly on time, it's speeding up and slowing down at certain points, and it's skipping a little bit off of beat. So what I did to fix that is, like I was saying, I added a bunch of effects. First thing I added was this halftime 1/3 preset that just causes it to skip every bar. Then I add this 1/3 gate preset from gross beat. I also automated it only at like 10% volume because I just want to sit in the background. I don't want to ruin the entire sample or just throw the artist off. Then finally I added this gross beat halftime preset just to glue everything together. And apart from adding this reverb, an EQ, and a few filters, everything together now sounds like this. So honestly, that's all you need to know. Just understand that these aren't like your typical 20 to 30 minute like trap melodic beats. They're incredibly complex, meaning they're going to take a lot of time to make, but I promise you if you follow all these steps, it's definitely going to be worth it. Yeah, but that's going to be it for Melodies as well as this tutorial. Let me know what you thought and what you want to see next. Make sure to follow my Instagram at FinnaFinesse. Also, if you want a good drum kit or you just want to support the channel in general, I have a link to my drum kit in the description. But yeah, apart from that, make sure to like, subscribe, and peace.